Hey everyone, we're getting together today to talk about how to say no. One of the things that we've talked to a lot of people about at multiple organizations and multiple levels in organizations is how to say no without necessarily coming across like you don't care about something, how to say no without, I don't want to make my manager mad, or even at home, how to say no without my friend thinking I'm a jerk.
Yeah, so many leaders are, well, continue to be overextended and overwhelmed, and saying no is such an important practice we're helping leaders with, so that they are getting themselves out of the stress zone and back into their personal performance zone.
Yeah. And the irony is oftentimes people who are high performers have said yes. We've learned to say yes to doing our share and then some. We've learned to say yes to stepping into those messy situations where people want help, or where we've got a particular skill set or just a work ethic that people want us to bring into that situation. And so we've developed sometimes a pattern of saying yes, yes, yes. And that can work until it doesn't. And we have so much on our plates that we're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get all this done? How is this going to work? Or I'm stressed, or I'm burned, and I feel like there's this much on the plate, and that's way more than I could possibly do.
Yeah, for so long, saying yes has been a big payoff for a lot of us in different ways, and now the cost is outweighing the payoff. And leaders are feeling it. They're feeling it. They're disappointed. They're depleted. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting you with tools that you can immediately start practicing, take action with, so that you can make sure you're not in the stress zone.
Yeah. So the first thing we want to jump into is helping people identify some of the patterns. And oftentimes what we don't recognize is we have these patterns that we've created, and sometimes it's with certain people, sometimes it's in certain kinds of situations. So an example may be, and I'll ask this question, how comfortable are you saying no if your manager comes to you and says, hey, will you please do X? And they're clearly wanting it done right now. That could be one. How comfortable are you with a family member coming to you and saying, hey, will you do this for me today? Or will you help me with this thing this weekend, when you know you've already got plans, you've got something else laid out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first step that you can start doing in identifying how you are unknowingly or unintentionally contributing to the problem. And a lot of times too, when we're starting to get up into the stress zone and we're overwhelmed and pressure's on, like it has been for over a year, we're only solidifying this habit. And so one way to start, just like Ivan's talking about, one way to start looking at, okay, how am I co-creating this, is to ask yourself questions, advancing questions about the patterns. What are the people patterns around this? Who do I tend to say yes to, or who am I afraid to say no to? What are the situation patterns? In what types of situations do I tend to say yes, and then later really, really wish that I had said no?
The situations can be also topics. So things like, oh, when it comes to taking care of the kids or taking care of the pets or doing this other thing, that's where I have a soft spot for that, or I care about that, or I want to make sure I'm not sending the message that I don't care about this. And so I'll default to saying yes to something, even when I know, man, I just haven't got time for that. What was I thinking?
Yeah, and when you start to ask yourself and answer these questions, you start to get some really good clarity, so that you can target your attention and your practice on and start taking some healthy risks. And we'll get into that. The other thing too about the patterns or the habits is sometimes our habit is so strong, we've got a default. And so for many of us, like you were saying earlier, for so many of us, the default at work is the saying yes. And what that's related to is a default and a habit in our thinking. A lot of us think that we're supposed to say yes, or that it's our responsibility to say yes. And that's where that's another place where we step in, and we want to make sure that you're challenging yourself and looking at your value and significance in the organization in a much more productive way that is fitting for where you are now. Because where you are now, so many of you have a lot of experience under your belt. And where you are now, if you're continuing to be in the habit or to be in that default of saying yes, it's irresponsible. Part of your responsibility now as a leader in your organization is to say no. It's determining what to say yes to, what to say no to, when to say yes, when to say no. So that's a shift in your mindset that is really important for you to start building your muscle around.
So what we're going to jump into now are 3.5 ways to say no, while also showing people that you care, while also showing people that you're still a team player, you're still committed, you're still perhaps a loving parent or family member, while also caring about yourself. Oftentimes, and this is one of my tendencies, is I'll say yes to things even if I know, ooh, that puts me in a bind. Well, I'm not caring for myself if I do that. If I do that repeatedly, well, no wonder I'm stressed out or burned out or feeling exhausted. And it can actually lead to some resentment of this other thing, when in reality, I'm the one who's created the condition that I'm now feeling this way about this.
I had a similar default on the personal side of saying yes, whether it was a get together, a birthday party, saying yes. And then when the time actually came, I was either I had like 3 commitments all at once. And then I started to feel, so I wouldn't go. And then I would start to feel so guilty and feel like a really crappy friend. And then not only was there some resentment for myself, the other I'm certain that there started to be some resentment on the other side of the equation. And which then I just started to spiral down into this really bad place. And that was really a stronger catalyst for me to practice how to say no. And that it lines up also with so many leaders. Just yesterday, I was talking with a leader, and she was recognizing that she was concerned that if she or her team were saying no, that they would have a hit on their credibility in the organization. And as we kept talking and I was asking some questions, what she began to discover is that they were saying yes, and then they were missing deadlines, missing deliverables.
Guilty.
And so now that was really seriously damaging her team's credibility and her credibility as a director in a good sized organization. And so that's where it's really important that you stop and be honest with yourself about what's the real cost here of these habits of saying yes.
And saying no was probably far less costly than saying yes and then blowing an assignment or blowing a timeline or a deadline, because particularly when that becomes a pattern, people start to think, oh my gosh, you're not on top of it, you're a flake. When that's not the case, it's just we've let ourselves become overloaded. So we're gonna step into the first of the tools, and the first one is you can say, instead of, if you want to say no, that's really what you're thinking. What you may say instead is, yes, I'll do that in 3 weeks, or yes, I'll do that in 4 months. And so what you're doing now is you're saying yes, and then providing a time frame that where you're pretty confident is going to work for you. And that way you're not jumping right in, taking your calendar and pushing everything out of the way to make space for this other item.
Yeah. And what's so good about that too, is that so often when we start to get really honest with those people patterns, so often it's not that we're afraid to say no to the request or to this initiative. We're afraid of saying no to the person. And so what I like about this one in turn, and actually many of the ways to say no are actually saying yes in a different way.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you're saying yes to the person. You're even saying yes, you're just saying not now.
Yeah.
And so again, that really helps to build the relationship. and build your credibility. And you're supporting yourself to stay in that your personal performance zone, rather than getting yourself overwhelmed and getting up into the stress zone.
Cool. So the second one is going to be, again, I like the way Kathy said it, saying no is really saying yes, and then adding in some modifiers or descriptors so it works for you. The second one is to say, yes, I'll do that, and I won't be doing this. So think of it kind of like a trade-off. I like to think of it as, if I have my calendar in front of me, if I know, oh gosh, I have time slated for this task, and a manager comes and says, hey, will you please do this? I may say, sure, I'll do that. I'm not going to be doing this other thing. So I'll do this other thing then in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever the time frame is.
Yeah, I recently started working with a leader that I worked with like 5 or 6 years ago, and he's now he's got, I don't know, several hundred people underneath him. He's got a big scope of responsibility. And I was really excited because he said that he was still practicing something. He was practicing many things that
Sure.
he had learned 5, 6 years ago. And one of them is similar to what you're talking about, Ivan. He continued to practice what we call showing your plate. And so it's making it more visible what that your actual scope of work or your actual project or program portfolio looks like, and making that more visible, sharing that. So you're helping to educate that other person, and you're helping to show that you're being really purposeful and strategic in terms of, okay, we can put that into our production schedule now. What that means though is this other item is not going to get completed until Q3, or not going to be revisited until August 15th.
Which is awesome, because that also opens up a fantastic spot for conversation, because at that point a manager may say, oh my gosh, that other thing actually that you've already got is more important than this, so this thing can wait, or I'll get someone else to jump on this item instead, because what you're working on actually is the most important thing for the team. So that's a great way to remind everyone that when we show what we're working on, sometimes it helps reorient even ourselves, and especially managers. This is what I've got, and now it's a conversation together about, okay, what's the priority that we really want to work on, given our near-term goals, our long-term goals, the day-to-day things that happen in a business.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the language that you used. You said, yes, I'll do this. And that means I won't be doing this other thing. And there's something really subtle in the language, and taking a closer look at it. One of the most important things we help leaders to do is to recognize what's really in their control and to exercise healthy control. And so in your language, what you're saying is you're very deliberate and decisive that yes, I'll do this. I'm going to add this, and I'm not going to do that. Because sometimes what's happening is so many of us feel like we're juggling all these balls in the air, and then we're like, oh shit, dropping balls, all
Left
over the
right.
place.
Yeah.
And it's very different when we use language first to remind ourselves, and then to remind others that we're not dropping anything. What we're doing is we're taking this other one and setting it down intentionally on purpose, so that we can take and pick this other one up.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the third way that we can say no is to say something different again, which is, instead of saying, I'll take this whole thing, so yes, I'll do all of this, is to say, oh, okay, I'll take this part. So now what we're doing is we're taking what might be several steps or multiple components to a request. And what we're doing is saying, okay, this is the spot where I have the time right now. This is the place where I have a particular skill set that's going to help. This is the part where my experience really lends me to support this particular aspect of this work.
Yeah, and it can be on big things in the work setting, and it can also be on small things. I remember when a friend of mine was going to be traveling for work, and this was right during that time when I was really feeling the pain of feeling really guilty, feeling bad about saying yes and not showing up. And so my friend was going to be traveling, and she asked if I would watch her dogs for that week. And of course, also I was like, oh, I'm already feeling overextended.
Don't drop that ball.
And
Don't drop
right,
that ball.
exactly. And so it was really helpful that one, I had already changed I started saying no. And what I was doing along with that is I shared with her, I'm working on not overextending myself, because I've been in a really bad habit of doing that. So what I can do is I can do Monday and Tuesday
Cool.
or like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of when you're gone. And so no matter if it's on the personal side and it seems really little or not as consequential as on the work side, it's just as important that we're practicing saying no or saying yes in that way.
Yeah.
On the personal side with these types of requests.
Well, you also bring up a great point that, and this is for everyone to remember, is that these tools are fantastic when you practice them. Just like Kathy talked about building a muscle. Well, I wouldn't walk into a gym and hop down on the bench press and attempt to crack out 500 pounds. I'd get killed. I want to build up. I want to build up with
even
slow.
That example is a little ambitious. Okay.
Sure. I was going for something really big on purpose. So if you're thinking, gosh, I want to be able to say no to my manager on something big, start with something small. Because when we practice these tools and we use them in different situations, we use them in different environments, it gives us a chance to grow that muscle, to get comfortable with it, to practice it in a series of different environments with different folks and in different ranges of intensity, so that when we know, gosh, my manager's asked me for something big and I really don't want to disappoint her, and I know this is a higher stakes conversation, you're going to feel more comfortable walking in and using that muscle that's stronger and that you practiced with a good bit.
Such a good point, because so many of us are making so many decisions every day, and we're getting these requests and tasks all over the place, whether it be at work and at home. And again, a lot of us are like switching back into work. I talked to 3 different people, and they said they switched last week back into in the office full time, their kids going to school full time. So now we're figuring out how to make it all work again.
Yeah.
And we're making all these decisions. And so it's the practicing every single day on how and when and with who to say no, and in these smaller ways, so that when it comes to these bigger ticket items, we're building that strength. The other thing, the bonus part also, in terms of when you're saying, all right, I'll take this piece. Yeah. So even with my friend, how I told her, I can help Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then what I did is I said, who else?
Yeah.
Who else are you tapping into? Who else did you have in mind that could help? So what I like about that too is it's another way that we're saying yes to our friend, or we're saying yes to our colleague. We're also saying no to the whole enchilada, and we're being specific and definitive on a commitment we will follow through with, that they can rely on us for. And then we're going even further. So now it's not only are we supporting them with the specific thing they asked them, we're supporting them on the bigger ball game.
Well, and like I was saying before, and I love the way you tied that in, Kathy, is if we're used to jumping into those situations to help, and our manager or a peer or our spouse or our partner is asking us to do something, now what we're doing is we're helping them remember that there are other people they can go to, other resources they can tap into, which is really beneficial, not just for us to have a smaller piece of that issue to jump on. It also means now this person is going to be thinking more completely about, oh yeah, I do have these 3 other friends, or I do have this neighbor I can ask, or I have these 2 other people on my team who have got some time and could probably help with this. And it may be a stretch for them for part of it. And this is a good healthy risk.
Yeah, for sure. So hope that you are walking away. Hopefully you've taken some notes, and you are doing several things. So let's recap. Number one, practice being honest with yourself on the cost of your habit of saying yes. And that means being really checking in with yourself in a candid, frank way. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
And making sure that you're getting the information in that emotion. Number two, taking a look at the patterns. So asking yourself some really good advancing questions to begin to recognize, all right, when do I tend to say yes? Or who do I tend to say yes to? And later, I really wish that I had said no. And then third is to practice these replacements, how to say no or how to say yes in a different way.
Yeah. Cool. So if you like this video, please do hit the subscribe button, and that way you'll know when we have new content that comes out. And also drop us a line. We'd love to hear what you guys would like us to talk about. We've got a lot of great information on our blog page and some other videos as well. And we're always willing to and interested in what topics are going to be most important for you.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, this one, I want to say, this one has been requested so often that we're going to build one of our crash courses. So keep your eyes open for that as well. Take action, start practicing, keep up your practice, and keep us posted. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.